What is going on, guys? My name is Jared and welcome back to another episode of Big Box of Crap that needs to get put on a boat. Let's get into it. Back in 2017, I began a full restoration of my 96 Bayliner by tearing it apart all the way down to the hull. From there, I began the rebuilding process, which included learning to fiberglass, rebuilding an engine and outdrive, learning to fare and paint, and even upholstery. Now, I've bought a 28-foot cabin cruiser and I'm starting all over. Welcome, my name's Jared. Now get ready, because it's going to be a ship show. Alright, now when I say crap, obviously I mean the finest overpriced crap from Mercruiser. So let's see what I got in this box. We have an all-new water hose. Now this is actually one that does not come with the standard Mercruiser Bellows kit, all that stuff. This is actually a aftermarket hose that is an attempt to fix the whole Bravo-itis thing. So it's got basically a clamped on hose here instead of the normal threaded insert thing. So we're gonna give this a try, see how it works out. What else? Obviously, new gimbal bearing needs to go in. All of our bellows. I also bought the exhaust tube. We won't be using the exhaust bellows. This is a pain in the butt to put on. Probably the hardest part of the bellows job, and it's too restrictive for a Bravo 3, so we're not using this anyway. So we are just gonna go on with the exhaust tube, which is way easier to put on and actually better for performance. Clamps, obviously, U-joint, ring, retention ring, shift cable, bellows. I also have a shift cable. Got your continuity clips for the hose clamps, so got everything we need here. So start putting this stuff on. Now, one thing we learned in the previous video is with this anti-fouling paint that I put on, we need to deal with some of the paint thickness in areas that are going to be critical. So anywhere the bellows goes, that's fine. They're flexible enough. That's not going to be a critical issue. However, we are going to need to check the fit first of some of these things, like the drive lube fitting, that kind of stuff, where the shift cable goes through. We're gonna have to check the fit of those, and then we'll start putting the bellows on. So let me get all that stuff kind of squared away. I'm not gonna show you that because nobody likes watching sanding, and I don't like sanding, so it's boring. Okay, be right back. All right, the first thing we are gonna start with on reassembling the rest of this transom assembly is the gimbal bearing. So this is a new gimbal bearing. This is a sealed unit. Now it does have this tolerance ring, and you can see the grease opening there that would be used if it was a grease bearing. I'm still gonna line it up more from OCD perspective, but it doesn't really matter in my case. So the other tools you're gonna need for this are big ol' hammer. We also need our alignment tool and the bearing driver tool. Fits on the alignment tool, and then we use that to hammer in the new gimbal bearing. Before we do that, we are going to lightly just kind of coat the outside of this with some oil. I'm just gonna use some drive lube just to give it some lubrication to go in. All right, there's one other thing to mention here in terms of how this thing goes in, and that is, see these notches here? Those get put in towards the transom. They don't face out, they face in. So now that I got it started, I'm just gonna stop real quick and make sure everything's going in nice and straight and in the orientation we want. So you can see here we got it going in. It looks like it's going in nice and straight, which is good. Let's keep going. Yeah, we're good. There you go. Gimbal bearing in. Check. Okay guys, now that we got the gimbal bearing in, the next thing I want to do is put in the new 1/4 inch hose for the gear lube. So the reason I want to do this first is because, if you can see in here, that fitting right there is going to be really hard to get to once the U-joint bellows is on, so we're going to do that first. Okay, so I am just going to take, this is a 10-inch piece of Parker push lock hose. I think as long as it's oil resistant, it's fine. So once again, before anything, I'm just gonna throw some drive lube on these hose barbs. Hopefully help the hose just slide on a little easier. Okay, so because I'm using push lock hose, I mean, it's kind of meant to be used without clamps really, so it's a little bit tight, so I'm just gonna get some needle nose pliers here and kind of use that to get some leverage. There we go. Okay, that's on. See that there? Now, you could use a hose clamp here, but because as tight as that is, and because a hose clamp is actually kind of a big pain in the butt to get in there, I'm actually just going to use a small zip tie. I've done that in the past, it works fine. Alright, we got our zip tie slid up over the end of the hose. Don't try and wrap it around up there, that would be ridiculous. So then, got it up in place here, let's just tighten it up. That is on, and let me get that clipped off with some side cutters, and then we'll move on to the U-joint bellows. Okay, so for the U-joint bellows, there's a couple things that are very important that you need to know about. One of which is it has a top. So if you look here, there's like a mold line where it's made. So you can see on this side it says top, so obviously that goes up. And the reason that's important is because you can see there's some small flats molded into here, and they need to align with certain things to make room for the water hose and things like that. So there is a correct orientation. Now, the other things that are important are these little clips. They come in your kit, you might not know what they're for. They are actually the grounding clips for your clamps. Because if you think about it, if you put your hose clamp on the outside of here, this is basically not connected to anything. It's just kind of like a floating ground. So it's important to put these clips on here, and what that does is there's little teeth on the inside there. If that's going to focus, who knows. And those bite into the aluminum and make an electrical connection. So that actually grounds the hose clamp, because if that's not and it corrodes away, you don't have a clamp on your bellows anymore. This is probably way overkill. I went a step above and beyond, and let's see if this shows up. Right there, that little light spot, I actually sanded down to bare metal where that little clip is going to make contact, because I didn't know if those little teeth would actually penetrate through the barrier coat and the epoxy and all that kind of stuff that I put on there. So that's sort of a belt and suspenders approach. So the first thing we need to do before we put the U-joint bellows on is actually take our bellows adhesive, and we're going to apply a thin coat to the inside, this rib here, that actually goes into a mating rib on the inside here. So that's how that aligns. We need to put a thin coat of bellows adhesive all the way around this, all the way around that, and we're going to let it dry for about 10 minutes. So it's almost like a contact cement, so you don't put it together wet, you kind of wait until it tacks up, and then you assemble it. So let's go ahead and get this applied to the bellows, to the gimbal housing, and start the clock. Alright, the bellows adhesive is set up, got the hose clamp sitting on here, so let's pop this on. Alright, next thing we're going to do is the exhaust tube, which goes right down below there. Same thing, we're going to apply the bellows adhesive, get the ground clamp on here, let it tack up for 10 minutes, and we'll get this installed. Alright, that adhesive is tacked up. Now on this one, you need to make sure the hose clamp is oriented a specific way. If you remember when we took this off, there's this tiny little hole here, and if you have a long enough screwdriver that's small enough to fit through there, that is the intent of that hole, to reach this hose clamp. So you want to have it oriented where the screw for the clamp is on top facing to the left so you can get in there. Now, I don't have a screwdriver that small. I was able to do it with a flexible screwdriver, but just be aware of that. And don't forget your ground clip. I'm actually going to put the hose clamp on after, just so it's kind of out of the way. So this one you can actually see when it's bottomed out, because it goes all the way up against that lip back there. I don't know if that's going to show up, but you'll see what I mean when you're doing it. Okay, let's get the hose clamp installed. So we have the exhaust bellows on. You can see the clamp down there is tightened. So now is what I consider the worst part of this entire job, which is getting the shift cable bellows onto the shift cable housing, because those are not the same size. So one thing I've done in the past, I don't know if it helps or not, but I do it anyway, is take some needle nose pliers, try and stretch this out a little bit. Okay, and then the next step is dish soap. So we're gonna cover the end of the shift cable in some dish soap to help try and, whoops, get things going on. Now's the fun part. There we go. That was the worst part over with. So at this point, we're just going to slide it up the rest of the cable. Alright, so we're just going to leave it there for now. Just leave a little bit out the end, so we're going to adjust this later. But it's on to the point now where we can get the shift boot installed. Okay, now we're just going to get the shift bellows installed, same as the other stuff. Bellows adhesive, let it set up a little bit, get that installed over the embossment there, put a clamp on, and keep moving. Okay, the bellows adhesive should be nice and cured, so let's go ahead and get this installed, hopefully. Okay, is on. So let's get the hose clamp up and over. Retrospect, it probably should have done this before the exhaust boot, but that's okay. It's not too bad. And that is the shift bellows installed. So at this point, I'm about out of time at the moment, so I am going to pause here, go take care of some stuff, and then when we come back, we are going to go ahead and get the water hose installed, which goes through that hole up there in the top. The speedometer hose is not going back in, so we're good on that. And then I think at that point we're going to be ready to throw the gimbal housing on, or the bell housing, sorry, which involves getting the inside of the U-joint bellows installed, the shift cable installed to that. The exhaust boot doesn't do anything. Get the gear lube hose installed, the water hose, trim senders, hinge pins, all that fun stuff. So, all right, we'll be back in a bit. About 2 seconds for you. And we're back where we left off yesterday. Got the shift bellows installed, and next thing we need to do is the water hose. Okay, now that we're in the boat, let's go ahead and get this water tube installed. So we're going to need a few things for this. The reason I'm inside the boat is because this special water hose has the flange already crimped to it. So we're not going to use the typical plastic hose insert in here. So I actually have to feed it through from the inside versus the old school where you just poke it through this way. So we're going to get this thing fed through there, but before I do that, because this has the flange on it already, I need to put the inner gasket on here first that comes with this kit. So it'll basically get fed onto the hose like this, and will sit on that flange there. So if we didn't do that now, there's no way to get on later, so don't forget that. So that looks good. Now we're just going to go ahead and feed this through. Okay, so with that pushed through the whole way, next thing we need to do is get these stainless steel studs installed here. So I'm going to coat these with some thread sealant, get them threaded in, and then we'll put on the other gaskets and the water housing. Okay, we got the studs on. Now let's go ahead and get the water housing installed with the extra gasket stuck on there. And I put a little bit of gasket sealer on the surface as well. So let's get this popped in here. Click, click. All right, so we are back in the garage real quick. I just want to go over real quick what I've done to the bell housing to get ready to install it on the boat. So I'm going to have a follow-up video where I discuss some of the things that I learned in this process that I would not do the next time or that I would fix. And one of those is masking off paint areas better. So that epoxy barrier paint that I put on has a pretty substantial thickness to it, to the point where things aren't going to fit together anymore. So if you look at the side of here, you can see I ended up having to sand down through the anti-fouling paint and the barrier coat, and even down to some of that Aluma Protect primer, and even some bare metal. And basically that's because this is meant to be a essentially metal on metal contact between the bell housing and the gimbal ring. So things like that, even inside of where these washers go, I had to sand down the paint in there to make it fit. And then anywhere that there was threads, I had to basically go in and chase those threads with a tap. So this threaded hose fitting for the drive lube, I had to retap that thread. Ended up having to re-drill this hole for the shift cable. Anywhere that there was paint buildup, even these threaded holes for the hinge pins, I had to basically take an extra hinge pin and make a tap. This one. So I basically took a file and filed a flat in there to essentially make a tap to chase the threads to get rid of any of the paint in there. So there was some prep work that had to be done with this thing. But it is ready to go. And as you can see at this point, I've already gone ahead and reinstalled the check valve assembly for the drive lube I already talked about this, the hose fitting for the drive lube on the other side. This is ready to go for the shift cable. I checked the fit, everything's good there. So this is basically ready to go, and even put the washers back in here, the wear washers, with a little bit of Bellows adhesive just to keep them from falling out while I'm working with it. So that being said, this thing is ready to go. I just wanted to explain some of the work that I did to this kind of off camera just to get it ready, but it's effectively good to go. Let's get set up here and finish this up. Unfortunately, my neighbor just decided to start mowing, so we're gonna have to deal with a little bit of noise. So sorry about that, but it is what it is. Okay guys, we're back out at the boat. Got my bell housing here, and the first thing I think I'm gonna do is get this drive lube hose on, because I think once the Bellows is on and shift cable, it's basically gonna be impossible to get to. So I am going to get a little bit of lube on the fitting. Shouldn't be too tight of a fit, but not gonna hurt. So again, that's this fitting here. Got a little bit of drive lube on there, and I know you can't see anything at all right now, but I'll try and show you afterwards. So if you can see that, that's it attached there. So with that on, we can now kind of spin this around. And just try and get everything lined up here with the shift cable. Okay, here we got the water hose through. Shift cable is at least started. I can't tell yet if it's the whole way lined up, but shouldn't be too bad. Okay, so before I go any further, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and install the hinge pins, because that's just gonna help hold everything together while I'm kind of wrenching on things and all that. So I got my hinge pins here and my red Loctite. These get torqued to like gigantic monkey gorilla torque. It's 145 foot-pounds, which is kind of nuts. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these installed. I got my special hinge pin tool here. Just get it hand tight for now. We'll get the other side in. Turn it this way a little bit. Should be good. Let me just peek in here, see how lined up it is. Should be close. Yep, that's pretty close. So that is the two hinge pins hand tight. Now, I got my torque wrench here set to 145 foot-pounds. Now, I'm not gonna go obviously all that in one step. I'm just gonna work side to side until I get up to the torque that I need to be at. That is hinge pins installed. Okay, so with that done, the next thing I want to do is install the inside of the U-joint bellows, which is pretty easy, honestly. But again, we're going to go ahead and apply our bellows adhesive to the inside here, let it set up for about 10 minutes, and then we will pop this in, and it gets this retaining ring right here, and that obviously, like everything on Mercruiser, takes its own tool. We're going to use that in a minute here, but let me go ahead and get the bellows adhesive on. Okay, so we got the bellows ready to go here. I'm going to try and show you this with this camera angle. Really, we're just trying to get in here, and we kind of got to pop it in on itself like this. There we go. Just kind of start working our way around. Like I said, this is a pretty easy part. Okay, now I'm not sure if you're able to see that, but there's actually a important point to note here, and that is there's actually two grooves in the inside of the bellows, and you actually want it to rest inside the second groove. Kind of see right there. So just make sure you're aware of that when you go to put it in there. And at this point, well, it looks like my battery's about to die, so I'm gonna go change this battery, and then we'll come back, and hopefully there'll be less noise, and we'll pop this ring in real quick. Okay, got a new battery in here, and it's time to pop in the retaining ring. So you can use soap on this, but I have this can of Power Tune. I bought this years ago, basically solely for this purpose, and it works really good. But anyway, we're just gonna spray some Power Tune on there. I guess the key point is don't try and put this in dry, because it will get stuck. That's it, don't even need a hammer, slides right in. So with the retaining ring in, next thing we got to do is get the water hose insert installed. Now I'm going to be honest with you, this is a new one for me. I haven't done this before because everything I had before was an alpha drive. So from what I understand, you basically lube these threaded inserts up with a little bit of soap, and you just thread them in. The ideal amount is, well, you want this hose to stick out about 1/8 of an inch when you're done. All right, minus the horrible mowing noises, that's the water hose installed. Next, we're gonna finish up the shift cable. All right, guys, well, I was just inside editing that last clip, and the noise was like beyond obscene. You couldn't hear anything. It was ridiculous. So I'm gonna cut to the chase and show you that the shift cable is installed, and I'll put a picture up on the screen here just to explain kind of the order of things. So obviously you have to push it in from the backside, and before you do that though, there's a sealing washer that goes over the shift cable that goes between the nut on the back and the back side of the bell housing. It's a little bit confusing because a lot of places online will tell you that it goes on this side under the nut. That is incorrect. It actually goes on the back side, which has been done. We put on the flanged lock nut here, torqued it down. That is good to go. So the other part of the shift cable is going to happen on the inside of the boat. So let's jump in there. Oh. Back inside the boat. Forgot to mention in the last clip, I edited that clip, realized how loud it was, and then life happened, and now we're in sweater weather. So I'm sporting the officially sanctioned Mount Washington Boatworks sweater. Anyway, let's get this cable installed. So the first thing I need to do is, I'm gonna install this, which you might be wondering what that is, but I just realized when I climbed in here that my shift cable didn't come with the spiral wrap protector. Don't ask me why, looked everywhere, can't find it, so apparently it didn't come with it. Instead of that, I'm going to install this plastic like flex sleeving. Really all that thing is providing is abrasion protection for where it comes in contact with the exhaust manifold, the Y pipe. It's not a heat thing, so Y pipe doesn't get hot, it's got water in it. Just to be safe, there's actually 2 layers here, and this is, this stuff with the white tracer in it is actually flame retardant, so it's rated for fire anyway, so it's like belt and suspenders. It's what I got on hand, so I'm going to use it. I think it'll be fine. I'm going to slide it on the shift cable and we'll zip tie it in place and keep moving. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is take this piece that comes in your shift cable kit, and we are going to install that on the end of the shift cable. So we slide the core through here, and we're going to thread this until it bottoms out. Okay. Now we're not going to take pliers or anything and go crazy with that, so we're just going to lock it in place with this jam nut. Let's get some pliers around here loosely and tighten this jam nut. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is put the end guide on, and to do that, this hole right here gets this little barrel nut thing, and you can see the through hole in there. That has to align with the core that comes through this. So we're going to put that in so that through hole is going like that. Okay. And now we're going to take our shift cable and poke it up through here. And we should see, hopefully this is going to show, we should see the core poke through that nut. See that? Hopefully, going through there. And then you can see it coming up into this inspection port, that little hole right above it. So when you can see that all the way to the end of that hole, that is when we put in these little lock nuts that come in from each side into that barrel nut. There's one from each side that'll lock that core in. So now as we double check that inspection port, make sure the core is still there, we go ahead and tighten these down. Okay, so we got those tightened. We can still see the cable core in the end of the inspection port, so that is good to go. All right, we're back in the garage. This is ridiculous. He's mowing again. It's like cursed. Anyway, this video is getting kind of long, so I think what I'm going to do is wrap this video up with the last thing that needs to be done on the outside of the boat for now. And that is this thing, which for those of you that saw my previous video is going to be the replacement bulkhead fitting for the drive loop hose. So you guys have seen me put this in the gimbal housing before, so I'm not going to go into detail. not gonna talk through it. I'll show you putting it in, but I'm not gonna talk just because I want to get it done with, and it's loud out there. So we got our fitting, we got the E-clip, so let's go get the hose installed on this in the boat, and then we'll wrap this one. I'll kind of explain to you what we're going to do in the next one, so let me go get this in real quick. Okay, that is the bulkhead fitting installed. It looks way better than that stupid plastic thing. That being said, this video is going to be obscenely long if I keep going. So I'm gonna stop it here and call this part 1 of the Bellows install. I don't know, we'll figure that out. In the next video, what do we have to finish up? We need to get the shift cable adjustment done. I may make that its own video, we'll see. But the shift cable still needs to be adjusted to the correct length on the inside. I need to get the Y pipe installed. I need to get the continuity kit installed. Before we wrap up this final transom assembly whole thing, before we can get back on the plumbing and the generator, get all that stuff taken care of, let's finish up this transom assembly. It's gonna feel really good to get that done. Oh, we gotta get the steering back on. Yeah, anyway, that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this useful. I tried to show as much detail as I can. For those of you that are looking like for a 5-minute, this is how you get the Bellows done. This isn't it. I'm here to show you the details, talk about the issues I ran into, whatnot, all that kind of stuff. So if you like that, please leave a thumbs up, comment down below. I try and answer them if I can. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you're aware of when the next one comes out. And thanks again, guys. See you in the next one. Bye.